As you heard this morning, the future is created. And I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful group of economists and practitioners to really start to dig into how do we create this future based on macroeconomic trends and execution excellence when it comes to businesses. Given we have 30 minutes, with your permission, I'd love to dive right into some questions for our panelists. And so with that, Paul, as chief economist at S&P, perhaps we can start with you. I'd like you to kick off our conversation and talk about what macroeconomic factors and megatrends are shaping the future of labor markets, both broadly, but also here in the Gulf region.
Great. Well, thanks very much. First, congrats to the Kingdom for putting on this wonderful conference. And on behalf of S&P Global, it's great to be here. Let's talk about the mega trends. We're not going to talk about the trade war, so that would take all day. But let's think about these big changes that are happening to the global economy and how they're mapping into labor markets. We have a geopolitical realignment. We have an energy transition. We have a technology transition. We've already heard about AI this morning, and we have demographic transition. So the question is, as a macro guy, if I look at countries, sectors, companies, what does that all mean for the labor market? And just speaking personally as an economist, we all need to be multidisciplinary now, right? We can't be sort of textbook trained and we go out into the world and we're effective at what we do. So we need to be conversant in geopolitics and energy and technology and everything else. So this is a sign of success. So countries that are able to do that, companies that are able to do that are going to succeed. Here for the Gulf, obviously this is an energy producing region, so it's front and center for the energy transition as we decarbonize. Vision 2030 plays right into that. And also this region has some demographic headwinds that aren't really present in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, there's the challenge of shrinking population. So in a nutshell, that's how I kind of put together the macro and the labor markets.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. And Eric, you're also an economist, right? As chief economist and economic counselor at the IDB, from your perspective, again, what are some of those macro factors and mega trends that are affecting markets in general, but in particular, again, as we focus on labor markets?
Thank you, Kari, for the question, and many thanks for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure. Paul already covered the mega trends, and I would say probably this can be also seen as a mega threat. And that's important because countries need to be prepared in some way. They need to have a plan. And Vision 2030 is having a plan. So this is an important message in terms of sending good examples to the world. Mega trends or mega threats, one related to technological change. Very, very important because it could be a productivity enhancer, but at the same time, it could replace many tasks and occupations. So that's one important thing. Demographic shifts, all the countries, or at least the majority of the countries, we have an aging problem, probably not in GCC, probably not in Saudi Arabia. But this is also a challenge because you have to have very dynamic labor markets and prepare human capital. Third, trade fragmentation and geopolitical tensions, very important, but now the message is to build bridges and not to build walls. I think that's important in terms of regional integration, but also try to match different regions in the world. For instance, try to have a better connection between Middle East and Latin America. Fiscal policy is under pressure everywhere, very important to tackle this issue. And sometimes we have to think about revenues, but also we have to think about efficiency. And finally, one important trend is the role of the private sector. Since the fiscal sector doesn't have much ammunition, we need a very active private sector. So I think countries need to be prepared and need a plan, and I think Saudi Arabia is doing that.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. And Noof is Managing Director of Economic Research at Jadwa Investments here in Saudi Arabia. Right, Eric mentioned, again, the necessity of the private sector. So as you look at some of these economic trends, can you speak a little bit about what those trends are here in the kingdom, and again, how those are transforming, creating new labor markets and conditions around there?
Of course. Thank you, Eric. And many thanks to the Human Capability Program for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in this conference. To start with, Eric, there is, just to build on what has been mentioned by Paul and Eric, it's the major trend that has been seen here in local economy is Vision 2030, and it's all of its related initiatives. So by the aim of Vision 2030 to diversify the local economy, many sectors have been established, many sectors have been expanded and driven forward. By doing this, it's paving the way to creating more job opportunities for the youth, for everyone in the kingdom, and also creating more investment opportunities by local and foreign investments, and also creating some opportunities for the SMEs, which are all an important source of job creation. By looking at the local, how we see it in the local labor market specifically, we can see three major trends happening in the past few years. First is the declining, significant decline in unemployment rate down from 12% in 2018, 2017, down to 7% by the end of 2024. And of course, by doing this, it's already reaching the Vision 2030's target of 7% by 2030. And I believe now that this target is being revised down. And associated with this decline in unemployment rate, there is also noted a higher or an increase in labor force participation. Labor force participation, especially among females, has been increasing, changing or actually taking the opportunity of the offered jobs and varied jobs offered in the local economy. The second trend is the...
Well, if we could pause there for a second, I'd like to just pick up on your comment around labor force participation, and maybe, Sadia, transition to you, right? Again, at the World Economic Forum, you run the New Economy and Society, the Center for the New Economy and Society, right? And again, part of that, from what I've understood, is building a future where economies and societies work for everyone, right? So can you talk about, when you look at labor markets, investments, and talent, what is the center doing to drive that sort of change that, again, Noof was talking about that they're trying to do here and succeeding here in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you very much. One of the things we're trying to do is just give us all better foresight. And our latest Future of Jobs report from 2 months ago, we analyzed about 1.2 billion jobs around the world, and we found that there will be a growth of about 170 million jobs and a loss of about 92. So while that is a net gain, there's a lot that's going to churn across those jobs. So the second thing we try to do is then work with governments and work with businesses to create the kinds of public-private collaborations that will, on the one hand, look at the reskilling, upskilling, and education sectors, and then on the other side, look much more at how we can take a more coherent approach to job transitions. If we know that these shifts are going to be happening, and we know that there will be millions and millions of people who will be impacted, let's ensure that they have the tools to help themselves, but let's also ensure that there's a system that supports them.
Thank you. And maybe picking up on your comment around job transition and job creation, turning to you, Safa, with the World Bank. The World Bank president has recently said that a key to the World Bank's approach for development is making job creation an explicit target. Could you say a little bit more about what that means as countries like Saudi Arabia look at being future ready in the new labor market?
Thank you. Thanks, Kevi, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this panel. Look, the world is facing a jobs crisis. There are about 1.2 billion young people who will reach working age in the next decade. And we also know the current trajectory of job creation, and Sadia mentioned some of that, there won't be enough jobs for this group. So the World Bank is keen to put jobs at the heart of what we do. And how do we do that? We help countries to continue with their growth agenda. For countries like the GCC, which I cover, including Saudi Arabia, it's about the diversification efforts, which are going super well, but they need to stay that course. It's about ensuring that the private sector generates enough jobs, and so there's a conducive environment for the private sector to grow. And it's about ensuring that the skills that are provided actually prep those young people to not only gain the jobs, but to create those jobs themselves. So We're focusing on that in support of not just the GCC countries in terms of our advisory technical work, but around the world through financing, through a keen focus on results, that it's not just financing and it's not just projects, but we want to see the results that actually will provide better chances for young people.
Yeah, perfect. And Lucrecia, of all the panelists, yours is probably the job I would like the least, is Chief Talent and Organizational Effectiveness Officer at MasterCard, right? Because again, a lot of the mega trends, and to Eric's point and Safa's point about some of the challenges out there, your job at MasterCard is essentially to, despite those challenges, or perhaps because of the opportunities they create jobs and essentially ensure MasterCard from a talent and org effectiveness perspective is successful. So could you talk a little bit about how those trends are being addressed within the context of, again, making MasterCard competitive?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for all the great insights that all of you create that we practitioners can apply in the context of our job. So at MasterCard, our focus is really making sure that our employees are, I would say, enabled and empowered to leverage AI to augment their work. Right, to see AI as a productivity, a well-being, and a career development partner. So we know that our employees are in different stages of their use of AI or familiarity with this new technology. So we have implemented a 3-tiered learning strategy that is really focused on meeting our employees where they are in their journey, whether they're beginners or they are like technical experts. So our first layer is really all about building these AI fundamentals. So really making sure that all of our employees have AI literacy in the foundations of AI, so they can really use it in their daily activities. So that is sort of like, I would say, tier number 1. Tier number 2 is much more contextualized in the context of different jobs. So whether you are in product, in engineering, you're in sales, you're in HR like myself, or you're in marketing, basically our focus is on really making sure that you can see how to use AI in the context of your job. So it's a lot about driving adoption to role-specific AI tools, like, for example, a coding assistant if you are a software development engineer. And then third, and this is something that I think Sadia spoke about, right? It's like obviously our responsibility to really make sure that we're really preparing our employees for the future, and it's really a lot about reskilling for new roles. So this is where, as we see certain jobs likely to be impacted by AI, we are basically helping prepare those employees for jobs that are emerging, that are being created, and where we really see the highest demand, both from a job creation standpoint and also from skills.
Perfect. So maybe, Sadia, based on Lucrecia's comments around AI, right? So at the center that you run at the World Economic Forum in general, could you talk a little bit about AI and how it translates into your initiatives and kind of your strategy as you look forward as an organization and your value proposition to the changes that are happening in the global labor market?
Sure. Maybe one data point. We found that the core skills across any role, on average, are going to change by about 39% in the next 5 years. So to think of it another way, if any one of us was going into a 5-year degree program today, 2 years of that degree program would be outdated by the time we're graduating. Yeah. And so that's the way we're trying to think about this. How do we bring more speed, more agility into all kinds of learning systems? Yes, at an individual level, make that information very, very public, but ensure that it is, by working with the private sector and having that responsibility for providing some of that reskilling and upskilling, as you are doing, but also working with the public sector to put that in place. Now, I would say one other piece around the AI element. Yes, we see a huge demand for understanding AI, for being able to work with AI. We see huge demand for augmentation through AI, but we do also see some displacement and automation that is going to completely make redundant certain roles, and I think we all know which ones those are, and there's quite a long list. But we also have to keep in mind that there will be growth in areas that require very human capabilities while understanding technology. And I think it's that duality that we have to now build our systems for.
Okay, perfect. So maybe following up on that point around duality and that some things are going to change, some need to stay the same, maybe Noof, I'll transition back to you. Right, again, in November of last year, the Kingdom announced a $100 billion initiative into AI and is clearly, as part of Vision 2030, positioned itself to be the region's leading hub when it comes to AI. So I know you do a lot of work and research into policy as well. So when you look at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's economic, investment, human capital policies, what's some advice or some changes that you think need to happen to ensure that, again, given the AI initiative and strategies here, there's the adequate human capabilities able to execute on it successfully?
Yes, actually, the work has been already started since the efforts of the Vision 2030, and so many initiatives and programs and policies have been already initiated. And for evidence of this, we saw that for example, the digital sector's share in GDP has rose from 11.5% in 2018 up to 14% in 2022. And then with the awareness as also with the digitalization and expanding the digital awareness, we also saw, according to latest estimates or surveys, that the population use of internet, for example, has increased from 68% in 2015 up to almost 99% in 2023. So by showing this, I'm trying to say that the community or the environment is set for any advancement in technology in the local economy, and with the right policies in place, the advancement would also go further. For example, with all of these efforts and trying to integrate AI into different sectors, let it be healthcare, financial institutions, government services, and also with the diversification efforts that has been led by the Vision 2030, we've also already seen some offering employment opportunities. So, for example, employment opportunities or job creation or employment in the private sector has already increased by 5% in 2024, followed by another 5% in 2023, which shows that the expansion is broad-based across all the sectors.
Yeah, perfect. And so maybe, Eric, I'd like to transition to you and maybe pull the thread on what Noof brought up around sectors, right? So the Inter-American Development Bank recently, and I think you helped author it, came out with a paper around how AI is going to be disrupting certain sectors, et cetera. Could you talk a little bit more about that paper and its implications or insights from it?
Sure, and I wrote that paper, so I know what we put together there. And we're trying to answer the question about how occupations are exposed to AI. Okay, so if you have one occupation, you have a vector of tasks, and those tasks can be replaced in some way or another with AI, some of the tasks. So we did this, and we didn't have enough resources to have a huge survey globally. So the novelty of the paper is that we ask AI what is the position of each occupation. And the numbers are striking because 28% of all jobs in the world are exposed in some way or another within 1 year. That doesn't mean that they are going to be replaced, but it means that they're exposed in some way. This is increasing up to 38% within 5 years and 44% in 10 years. If you take jobs globally, it means that the exposition is 1 billion jobs are exposed to AI globally. I did the calculation for Saudi Arabia, and within 1 year is more than 4 million. And in 10 years, it's going to be more than 7 million. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to be replaced, but it means that you're exposed in some way. The hit is not evenly distributed. Women, more hit by AI. Poor groups, more hit by AI. So we need to do something. And as I said in my first answer, I think it's important to have a plan on that. So I think this is important to take care about this, and to have a plan in terms of education, in terms of skilling and reskilling, and in terms of a continuous plan for the implementation of AI to be a productivity enhancer and not to be replaced by that.
Yeah.
And in an important issue that it's all type of professions, even more complex occupations like medical doctors. So you can see a lot of heterogeneity among medical specialties. And for instance, radiologists or dermatologists are really exposed to AI, more than pediatricians or psychologists.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, I would prefer to go to an AI radiologist rather than to a radiologist because it will have millions of cases and not only some of the clients, which can be hundreds.
So, I mean, AI is transformative, and as you said, up to 4 million, I think, jobs here in Saudi Arabia are exposed to AI. So, Safa, maybe taking a step back, again, still understanding AI, but looking a little more broadly, what are 2 to 3 things that countries like Saudi Arabia and here in the region can start to do today to be future ready for that potential disruption?
Thank you. So, look, I mean, for me, we need to be looking at basics. So if you tell me 1, 2, 3 things, I would say continue with the diversification agenda.
Yeah.
Because whether it's AI or any other technology, we need to have growth and we need to have jobs.
Yep.
Secondly, I think it's really important to think about fiscal discipline. In a world that's so volatile today, countries like Saudi Arabia or any other country in the world really needs to keep on track on their fiscal discipline. And third, I think it's also, or related actually, I wouldn't say third, related to that is really debt management. A second core area that's also important, we all spoke about it, is really around the private sector. I think the private sector is where jobs will be coming. And the new kinds of jobs, I don't think AI will take over all of the jobs. Mm-hmm. And so countries will need to focus on ensuring the investments coming to the country and creating jobs, right? And in the Middle East and North Africa, while we hear Saudi is doing a great job, but it has the highest rate of youth unemployment. And female labor force participation rates are the lowest in the Middle East and North Africa. Saudi did an impressive job in a very short period of time, almost doubling that rate. But it still is an issue. So jobs are critical. And then the third and final, I think, area that needs focus is around skills development and education. Education that meets the requirements of the future labor market, education that takes into account technologies. And we all know that it's education that generates innovation, right? So I would say these are really critical aspects, core, basic, but important for the region.
Perfect. So Paul, as Safa was talking, I saw your head nodding. So I guess same question
I was ready to jump in. Yeah. So I think, well, first of all, this is a human, human capability, human development conference. Sometimes the jobs are created, but the education system isn't producing the types of people that we need to fill those jobs. So I was at a wonderful World Economic Forum conference last week in the US, and they were talking about not the universities, but kind of that middle bit that gets disregarded sometimes. So they were talking about community colleges, they were talking about trade schools, and in the US, there is this kind of gap where we almost have too many college graduates and not enough people learning the trades and these other things. So the community colleges and the trade schools are starting to step up. They're working very closely with the industry, to your point. They're kind of curating their own coursework to fit the needs of industry. It also kind of solves this problem of how job skills are evolving over time. So again, it would be very consistent with the lifetime learning we're talking about today. And I think more importantly, it's going to help the income distribution, because we started by talking about all these megatrends, and these megatrends tend to drive inequality, and they tend to drive a deterioration in income distribution. So if we take care of that middle or lower middle with the trade schools and the community colleges working with industry, we can make sure that the education system is providing the skills that the employers need.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. And again, Lucrecia, going back to you, again, I don't envy your role, right? But again, as kind of the key practitioner here on the panel, you are responsible, again, for building that future talent pipeline that everybody's talked about, at least the economists have, right? So When you look at the private sector in general, but again, thinking about the region and thinking about Saudi Arabia in particular, what's some advice or guidance that, from your experience, that you would give them in terms of helping build that future-ready talent pipeline?
Thank you. That's a really great question. I would say that given the rapid change in the talent needs that I think we're creating in this panel and the prior panels this morning, I would say that, and most of them are unknown, right? Some of the changes we know, many of them we don't know. I would say focusing on the agility and the flexibility of your workforce, in my mind, is like number one, and couldn't be more critical. Focusing on skills versus experiences or degrees or titles. I think skills are the currency that are going to really help us drive greater agility and flexibility in our workforce. I think that as practitioners is something that, it can really help us address talent needs in a faster way, in particular those that are not really unknown, as well as being probably better and much more agile in how we really plan the future needs of the workforce. Many of them, as we said, they're unknown, right? So that we can be much more proactive and be more ready in terms of how can we redeploy, reskill, upskill the workforce. And lastly, I would say that we're living in highly unprecedented times that I think require big and bold thinking. It really requires for us to think very differently, thinking outside of the box. For us at MasterCard, it meant implementing an AI-driven talent marketplace that really puts the skills at the center, puts them on center stage, and also puts the employee at the center of their journey. So through this talent place, employees get matched to different types of opportunities depending on the skills they have and the skills they want to build. So what this has done for us is probably from an employee perspective, it really has opened their eyes as it relates to the different career paths that they could have, and also has provided them with greater access and greater information as it relates to the sort of supply and demand of skills and jobs so that they can proactively take action in how they chart their career. And then from an employer perspective, it has also given us greater access and much more proactive access to the skills that we have versus the skills that we need so that we can get kind of ahead of the game in getting our workforce ready. So I would just invite all of you to really think about, in the context of your organization, what does big and bold mean? And take advantage of, I think, all the incredible innovations that are being shared this week.
Yeah, perfect.
Can I jump in for just 30 seconds?
Yeah, please.
S&P Global is a very similar firm to MasterCard. We're kind of in the same space, so we're on the receiving end of a lot of these things, but we also have very active AI training program. We have required courses. We have internal competition. We have reverse mentoring where the young digital natives are training old guys like me. So I think it's very much part of the corporate culture these days to do a kind of holistic look at AI and try to upskill everybody from the top to the bottom and also globally.
And maybe, Noof, I'll ask you to pull the thread on that big and bold a little, right? Again, as the Saudi representative on this panel, a woman very successful at Jadwa Investments, if you were to give some advice to young Saudi women out there about being big and bold, just 10, 15 seconds, what would that be? And the rest of the panelists, I'll be coming to the rest of you as well for a quick 10-second, 15-second comment on that.
Well, I believe that the opportunities out there that has been provided by Vision 2030 is immense and diverse through many sectors around the local economy. So I think with the right education, with the right skills, the opportunities is everywhere.
Safa, big and bold.
Great. So I'll follow actually around education. I think it's not just education, but it's learning. I think what education systems need to do is allow young people learn to think, to solve problems, rather than memorize what they're being taught. And that's the only way they can take forward the future. And I just want to share one verse that a lot of people here will probably know. العلم يبني بيوتا لا عماد لها والجهل يهدم بيت العز.
The speaker just recited poetry in English, in Arabic, sorry.
Ignorance demolishes a house of pride and honor.
Perfect. Paul?
It's the culture. It's a learning culture. It's a lifetime learning culture. It's an experimenting culture. We just, got to go with the times. That's the way it is now.
Eric?
I would say think long term. And that's why I love this visit and to learn about Vision 2030. I think every country needs a vision long term, trying to avoid the political cycle, to invest not only in infrastructure, but in our human capital.
Perfect. And Sadia, please bring us home.
Thinking of human capital development as an investment and not an expense.
Perfect. Thank you. Will you please join me in thanking the panel?